Hey there, this is John from thediscard.com recording another One Ticket Commander Challenge deck tech. This time around, we've got Zurgo Bellstriker. This is a one ticket commander, meaning all of the cards in this deck, not counting basic lands, total one ticket or less. So we're talking about basically $1 or less. And this time around, we've got actually a pretty low budget deck. This one in paper is under $25 easily. I actually added some more stuff to the deck to bring it closer to the one ticket amount because my original build was only 80 cents on Magic the Gathering Online. So we're going to switch over here to Tapped Out, or excuse me, we're going to switch over to MTG Goldfish. We have the deck list up on MTG Goldfish and Tapped Out as well. You can find this list and whatever Corey's list is going to be when we play against each other for the one ticket commander challenge over at thediscard.com as well as at cardknocklife.com, his website. So again, we're looking at Zurgo Bellstriker. Zurgo here is a 1-mana legendary orc warrior. He's a 2/2 who cannot block creatures with power 2 or greater. He's got dash for 1 and a red, which means you can cast it for its dash cost. If you do, it gets haste, and then it's returned from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So we're probably not going to use that ability that much. And to be honest, I think Zurgo's just going to be maybe 2 points of damage, maybe 4 points of damage in a game if we're lucky. There are a few things later in the game that we may want to cast that will take care of or make use of the fact that we have this creature on the board. But it's really just a jumping off point to sort of set the tone of the deck, set the theme. I've talked before in my previous deck tech, Daxos, that with such a low budget like this, the thing that I want to do when I'm looking at building a deck is find some commander that can sort of set the tone for my deck, can set the general theme, and I really want to focus in on that theme and get there with as many of the slots in my deck as possible, because we can't really afford to just try and play a commander that you would normally play, but swap out the cards for cheaper versions. I'm sure there are some decks that are going to work if you do that, but I think it's much more valuable to say, I want to go for this strategy, and I want to dedicate all of my resources towards that strategy. Another thing to keep in mind is that we are playing with a special rule set here in our version of the one ticket commander. We are playing with the normal commander band list, but we are playing 1v1. So I can build this deck assuming I am playing against one opponent. You may want to change the deck up if you're playing against a full group of people, or if you're taking this deck as a starting point. I think this could totally be a viable casual commander deck for a group setting, especially when we look at here the paper price as of recording this, $22.82, not counting the basic lands, which, let's face it, if you can't find 30 some basic lands for free, I will be very surprised. But anyway, let's get into the main strategy here. With that set of Zurgo being sort of the sort of starting point for the deck, we're looking to just be aggressive, and I've got the added sort of goal of stealing my opponent's creatures and using them against them. So I'm kind of using Zurgo as like he's the leader. We're going to get in with damage early. I know that I can get a creature on the board on turn 1 every single game with Zurgo Bellstriker. And then later on, we're going to fling him or use him as fodder and just throw him at the opponent. So let's take a look at some of the creatures we've got in the deck here. Starting off early, we've got Scorch Rusalka. This is going to be one of our many sacrifice outlets. Again, part of the theme of this deck is taking our opponent's creatures and throwing them at them, taking our own creatures, throwing them at the opponent. We don't really care as long as we can get the damage in as fast as possible. We've got Jeering Instigator here. This is one of the many cards in the deck that steals your opponent's creatures. We're going to put it face down, and then when we morph him up, we get to take one of their creatures. It gains haste, and we can attack them with it. So most of the time we will not cast him on 2. I don't really see much of a reason to do that. Goblin Rhyme Runner, this is going to help our creatures get through. We're never going to be able to use his second ability there to give a creature haste because we don't have any snow mana or anything that produces snow mana. but we can use them to make a creature not block. Not block. And there might be a better card in this slot. There might actually be there might be a case for putting a wall in there or something like that. One of the maybe the 0/8 wall for 3 mana, but I think just trying to be aggressive here is what we want to do. We've got Hell's Thunder. This is another card that sort of plays off of the theme of throwing stuff at the opponent here. It is a 4/4 flying haste until end of turn, or at end of turn you sacrifice it. So you get 4 damage in most likely for 3. You can unearth it later for 5, and if you have any of the sacrifice outlets, you will gain additional value there. Volshock Sorcerer is one of a number of pingers in the deck. This is a 1/1 haste that can tap to deal 1 damage to a creature or player. There are going to be a lot of creatures that our opponent may not even be able to cast because they know we can just ping it. It makes combat damage tricky because maybe they have a 4/4, they can't block our 3/3 because the sorcerer will be able to get in there and kill their creature, finish it off, or at the very least, it's going to be a damage a turn until they deal with the sorcerer. Blistering Firecat, this is another one of the creatures that takes advantage of all of the sacrifice outlets. This is another morph creature. So if you're unfamiliar with morph, if you happen to have not played during one of the sets that it was around, you can put the creature face down for 3 colorless mana as a 2/2 instead of casting it for its normal cost, and then you can turn it face up anytime for its morph cost. So the idea with the Blistering Firecat is you put it on the ground as a 2/2, you attack the opponent. Maybe they don't block because they're not sure what it could be. It could be anything. And they don't want to put one of their creatures in front of it, or even if they do block, you pay 2 mana to morph it face up. It's a 7/1 trample. So you're going to be probably killing one of their creatures or dealing 7 damage to them. And then you're going to hopefully want to sacrifice it with one of the many different sacrifice outlets because you're going to be losing it at end of turn anyway. Captivating Crew, this is a new addition from Ixalan. For 3 mana, you can basically take one of their creatures until end of turn and attack with it. So a little bit of a reusable effect there, and a way to use our mana here if we do get in the late game. Enthralling Victor, another creature that's going to take a creature. Frost Wielder is another pinger. We've got some classics in here. Jeska from Judgment here, a 3/1 first strike haste, which is going to be a problem in and of itself. Might be difficult for the opponent to block. If we can't get through with her, then we can just again use her as a pinger there for 4 mana. Keldon Champion, this is a 3/2 haste with Echo, and when it enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to target player. So we're going to hit them for 3. We're hopefully going to attack them for 3 as well. And then, depending on what's in our hand, we may want to pay the Echo cost and keep them around, or we may just want to fling them at the opponent. Oracle Bones here. This is a 3/1 haste with Tribute 2, so the opponent can choose to pay Tribute and put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. If they don't, we get to cast an instant or sorcery for free. So the ideal situation here is we cast the Oracle of Bones. The opponent says, no, I'm not going to put the counters on it. Then we get to cast one of our many sort of active treason type effects here, steal one of their creatures, attack them with both, and then maybe even sacrifice a creature as well. Rakamar, this is just a good value haste creature. Every single turn, we can pay a red and tap it to put a 3/1 elemental creature token with haste onto the battlefield. Charging Monster Sword. This is another card from Ixalan. I really like this in this kind of format because it's 5 mana for a 5/5 trample haste. It's going to attack your opponent. Most likely, they're going to have to block unprofitably to get rid of it, or it's just going to deal 5 damage to them and stick around, and they have to deal with it eventually. So I think this is a pretty powerful card for a budget format like this. Falconwrath Marauders, another just good haste creature. It's got flying, and if the opponent doesn't block it, if it deals combat damage to them, then you get to put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So you can see how that spirals out of control if the opponent just does not have anything to block it with. Zealous Conscripts, another way to steal a creature. Bloodshot Cyclops, this is another sacrifice outlet, so we can tap and sacrifice a creature to basically fling it at a creature or player. Conquering Manticore, we're going to steal a creature. And then sort of towards the top end, we're looking mostly at just haste creatures, just more ways to put our mana into a 5/5 or 6/5 creature that is going to be hitting our opponent as much as possible. The Hellkite Charger here is a 5/5 flying haste, and when it attacks, you can pay 7 mana. If you do, you get to untap all your creatures and have another attack phase, another combat phase. So uh, if it sticks around long enough, you're going to be beating them with a lot of damage turn after turn. So they have to deal with it. Kamal here is a 6/1 haste. If they don't have anything that can block it, that's not bad at all. Get in there for 6, but most likely you're going to be using his tap ability to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. That adds up over time, and you're going to be able to eat a lot of creatures with Kamal. Oni of Wild Places. This is a 6/5 haste. At the beginning of your upkeep, you return a red creature you control to its owner's hand. So this is not ideal because we would like to not have to return creatures if we don't have any good way to do that. I think the idea is if you only have Oni of Wild Places, you kind of have to keep returning it to your hand, but it has haste. However, we do have a number of creatures that don't mind getting returned to your hand. So any of them with enters a battlefield effects, or even just the haste creatures are totally fine to return them if we have no other option. Predator Dragon, this is going to eat up some of those tokens. It's going to eat up our Zurgo. It's going to eat up any of the little creatures that we've put on the board that are no longer valuable. And it's going to get a +1/+1 counter, or 2 of them, I should say, for each of the creatures you devour with it. So swinging for 6 or 8 with this is going to be pretty devastating and hard to deal with. And then Rorik's Bladewing is just a 6/5 flying haste. So that's all of the creatures there. Let's take a look at some of the sorceries here. Down on the sort of lower end of the curve for sorceries, you can see we have a lot in the deck. Sorceries and instants, I should say. We've got 35 compared to only 23 creatures because, again, we are stealing our opponent's creatures and using those instead. Hopefully, we can sacrifice every single creature we take. That's our ideal outcome, because if we do, then every single one of these spells is a removal spell as well. But on the low end of the curve, we've got things like collateral damage, where we're going to sacrifice a creature to deal 3 damage. We've got some cards that draw us cards, like Faithless Looting. Infernal Plunge, this is another card that sacrifices a creature as an additional cost. So we're going to get some mana out of one of those creatures. Magmatic Insight, you discard a land card, so if we get flooded, we draw a card. We've got a lot of stuff like Cathartic Reunion. Red does not do a great job of drawing cards, so we more or less have to live with cycling through our cards or discarding cards first to draw cards. So we're using, I think, every single one of the 2 mana discard a certain amount of cards, draw a certain amount of cards, spells that are in the game. We've got Dangerous Wager, discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. So hopefully we're casting this when we have nothing in our hand that we're going to be reasonably casting. We've got a couple of removal spells as well, like Incinerate here. It's just a good way to get rid of a creature permanently, or not permanently, but just get rid of a creature or deal damage to the opponent here. We've got Fling, of course, the classic. Just throw the creature at the opponent. Mizzium Mortars to get rid of everything. Pyretic Ritual. This is honestly just a way to get some of our bigger creatures out faster if we can. We do have a good amount of stuff that costs 4+ mana, and if we can get a Predator Dragon on the ground or a Rorik's Bladewing on the ground on turn 4 instead of turn 6, I think that's going to give us a pretty good advantage. And to be honest, this is a bit of a splurge. You can see here at 0.05 tickets, because the deck was just so cheap. So I thought, why not? Let's try playing with those. Let's see what else we have. So looking at our active treason type effects here, we've got Wrangle, which is going to take a creature with power 4 or less. Active treason. We've got Harness by Force, so we can gain control of multiple creatures. Mark of Mutiny gains control of a creature and puts a +1/+1 counter on it. Traitorous Blood, Unwilling Recruit. This one's pretty neat here. If we can, if we end up late game particularly, we can gain control of a creature and give it +X+O until end of turn, which is pretty neat. And that plays well into all of our Fling abilities, which most of them are based on power. So not only can we can sort of add insult to injury there, I guess, is what I should say. Some general removal here, Faded Conflagration. This card I'm playing not necessarily because I think it's an amazing removal spell. I definitely think it's good to be able to deal 5 damage to a creature. We're not really going to hit a Planeswalker. I doubt you're going to see very many Planeswalkers in such a budget format, but in a paper format, you certainly will see some budget Planeswalkers there. So that's good. But the bigger reason that I'm playing this card is because of the Scry 2. Again, we don't have a whole lot of options for red card advantage, particularly on a budget like this. So getting to kill a creature and scry 2 is pretty helpful. We've got Grab the Reins. We can steal a creature and potentially fling it with this card itself. Limits of Solidarity. This one's from Amonkhet here. So I like this one because you can cycle it. 4 mana to take a creature is really not a great value, but if we have ways to sacrifice it, it gets better then. And being able to cycle it early game, I think, is worth including it in the deck. Lose Calm, Malevolent Whispers. We've got Active Aggression, Traitor's Instinct, Press into Service. These are all cards that are going to let us steal our opponent's creatures. So you can see where most of the spell slots are in the deck. We're playing most of the cards that take creatures in red. Soul Blast is a cool finisher. As an additional cost to cast Soul Blast, you sacrifice all creatures you control, and it deals damage to target creature or player equal to the total power of the sacrificed creatures. Now, with it costing 6 mana, there's not much of a chance that you're going to be stealing an opponent's creature and then flinging it with Soul Blast here. This is really just a finisher. You know, if you get your opponent down, the total power of all of your creatures is greater than or equal to their life total, and they are tapped out, or they have no reasonable way to gain life or stop this effect from doing anything, to stop this effect, then you're just going to win the game with the Soul Blast. So again, just another way to end the game a little bit sooner. I like to think of this as saying, if we've got six mana open, we can potentially take a turn off the clock there. Spawning Pit, one of the best sacrifice outlets, in my opinion. It just lets us sacrifice a creature. I think this is the only one in our deck that does not require us to pay any mana, so we really want to draw this if at all possible. And it's not only going to let us sacrifice creatures without paying any mana, but we get a charge counter every time we do that, and we can pay 1 and remove 2 charge counters to get a 2/2 spawn artifact creature token. So we'll get a little bit of value out of that as well. Occasionally we'll get a blocker. We'll get another creature that can be flung at the opponent or what have you. Only a few cards left in the deck. We have Barrage of Expendables. This is another repeatable sacrifice outlet. This is basically the Scorched Rusalka, but not on a creature. We've got Blood Rites. This is basically one additional mana, 1 additional damage when we're sacrificing a creature. And then Pyrohemia. I know this doesn't play super well with some of our cards, like the 3/1 Token Maker or any of the other 1 toughness creatures, but I think it's just a powerful enough effect, especially if we're looking to clear the board. Our opponent has to play around this card, and however much mana we have open, they have to know that we can filter all of that through to deal that much damage to each creature and each player. Pyrohemia is one of the color shifted cards from the Time Spiral block, and I think this card has always been super powerful and kind of busted in any format it can be played in. It does cost 4 mana to get it on the board, but being able to pump all your mana in to deal damage, there's a lot of situations where maybe you don't want to kill any creatures, you don't want to kill any of your stuff, as long as you don't have any X ones. You can just maybe at end of turn you pump as much mana through it as you can. Of course, at end of turn, if no creatures are in play, you sacrifice Pyrohemia, but that's not too much of a problem. A lot of times you'll just get this down on turn 4. Turn 5, you might wipe the board, and you're totally gonna get your value with that, and it's dealing damage to each player. So this is sort of another kind of red deck wins type card here. You don't really care what your life total is as long as it's higher than your opponent's, and you get them down to 0. So yeah, that's the deck. That's more or less the entirety of what Zurgo's going for. We're going sort of pedal to the metal with our aggro here, stealing our opponent's creatures along the way, and adding insult to injury by throwing them at their face. So like I said, check out the video, which you can find on our YouTube channel, and you can also head over to thediscard.com to see the full deck list and sort of read a written breakdown of the deck as well. Thanks.